check out Cajun Lights, your complete dog hunting outfitter. Tracking equipment, leashes, collars, dog supplies, and much, much more. You can find it all at CajunLights.com. And don't forget their outstanding lineup of lights. You can find it all at CajunLights.com. Elite nutrition products are the hottest thing on the market right now for dog and horse owners. And Houndsman XP is a dealer. You can find all their products on our website at houndsmanxp.com. Over the past 5 years, you've tuned into this podcast, and I don't take it lightly. We have built a mutual trust. And when I recommend a product, it's because I believe in it, I use it, and I'm given my seal of approval for that. I'm putting my name on that. And with Elite Nutrition products, I do trust it. I do use it. I've seen great results with their essential dogs, their pre and probiotics, their tick-borne disease treatment. It's all natural. It's a great alternative to pharmaceuticals when used appropriately. If you expect extreme performance, you need Elite Nutrition. Available from houndsmanxp.com.
He came through and he went tap, 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 tap on a bunch of ducks, and ducks rained out of the air into the puddles. And he whipped around and grabbed with a foot around the neck of a hen ringneck that was in a couple of inches of water. I'm offering him food in order to take him off the duck, and he's letting me take the duck away and looking at something else.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, and I guess I should wish you all a Happy New Year. It's kind of crazy to think this is going on year 7 now for me doing this podcast, and year 2 of me being on my own doing it, and so thank you all again for joining me. I've got a few more episodes for you here, including this one, before we get to episode 200, which is going to be a really nice one. Can't wait to get it out to you all. And then, depending on what happens from there, I may take another short hiatus. I'm not really sure. It depends on whether or not I'm able to get more stuff recorded and what the demand continues to be for all of this and all that kind of good stuff. As some of you may have seen, I posted recently that I may have to reevaluate things coming up here in the short term and also long term future of the podcast. So we'll see how things continue to go. But that being said, as far as this episode goes, I had a couple of people email me and request Karl come on the podcast, and there's probably plenty of you that are familiar with Karl, have talked to him either online or otherwise. And regardless, for those of you that are just new listening or have been listeners for a good while, you all have heard many opinions of falconers from all over the world. Karl definitely has a lot of opinions on what he thinks should happen with falconry in our country as far as rules, regulations, things like that. He's also got some good stories to share, and regardless whether or not you agree with anything you hear in this episode or not, this is another point of view from yet another falconer from here in the U.S., and you may agree, you may not. You're more than welcome to do either, and you are more than welcome to your opinion on how things should or shouldn't go. One thing I know I've learned in talking to so many different falconers from around the world is that there is really no perfect system, and I'm not really sure there ever can be. But either way, one thing is certain: falconers will always have opinions, and you're welcome to agree or not. So that being said, you might find this episode entertaining or infuriating or whatever the case might be. This is another semi-lengthy episode, and I hope that at least, if nothing else, it'll get you thinking. And as always, I hope you get something out of it. So that being said, as always, we're just going to jump right into this lengthy episode with Karl Kerster. And once again, Happy New Year, everybody. Hope your seasons are going well. Here we go. Nice to officially meet you. Whenever I do these things, it's always sometimes at the behest of others, and I believe it was,
as in this case, yes.
Yes. So, and that's fine. I mean, I owe a lot of these episodes to the efforts of other people as much as just mine in making sure they happen. I mean, there's been a lot of episodes I've recorded that wouldn't have happened without the recommendations or the networking help of others. And so, I mean, I guess, thanks to your apprentice for, taking the time to email me and, I guess more or less volunteer you for this venture.
Yes. Well, I am one to volunteer, and I have a lot of apprentices, and he's the biggest fan among them. He wanted me recorded, which is fine. It's part of the game. In fact, I have a lot of opinions that I do like to share, and I wanted to actually get started with a couple of the most incredible falconry flights that I've had, that are so incredible that they make people not believe me, which is the most incredible flight, is when you tell the story and people don't believe it because it's so cool.
Well, we can go ahead and start how we usually end if you'd like. And just go ahead and
we can talk about all kinds of things, but there's just a couple of incredible flights.
Sure.
That I like to talk about.
Go for it.
Okay. So, flying, a small Tiercelinatum peregrine named Manfred, Manfred being, the name of, the Emperor Frederick's son, King Frederick of Sicily. Mm-hmm. So my first Tiercel peregrine, I named Frederick after the emperor. And so when I got a son from him, I named him Manfred. Manfred was a great bird, and a bird that made me locally famous among falconers because he was just great and not big. So everything he did, like a big bird, was impressive. But late in the season, when we've got lots of ducks, because early in the season we just don't have any to speak of, and it's really hard to get going. But I was at a pond that's very long and not very narrow. It wasn't like it's a canal or anything. It's a pretty generous sized pond, and it's fed by a stream that comes from a bigger pond, a quarter mile away. And it's granite bottomed, the stream, and has a bunch of pools that are to the upstream side of the pond itself. And it has a single dike across the draw that creates the pond. Most people, including myself, call this a dike pond. And there were a mixed bunch of ducks on the pond. Bird was up nice. And at the time, I would have said that it was 650 feet. Now that I have the Marshall GPS, it might have been 200 or 300, but he was up nice in any case. And when I flushed, the ducks went together up the draw along the stream with the possibility of being able to bail into the stream when they're being attacked. And he came through and he went tap, 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 tap on a bunch of ducks, and ducks rained out of the air into the puddles. And he whipped around and grabbed with a foot around the neck of a hen ringneck that was in a couple of inches of water and couldn't go any deeper because it's on granite. And I got over there, and I went to pick him up. And since he just had this duck around the neck and he hadn't laid into it yet, I was excited to be able to do a catch and release, which may not be legal, but this is 25 years ago. And so I don't have to worry about statute of limitations on this, that I love to do catch and release, whether it's legal or not. And I went to pick him up, and he stepped up and for a pigeon breast on my glove, attached to the wing. But he didn't start eating. He let me take the duck away, which I put into my back of my Pinio vest. And he's looking at something. And I look over, and there's a hen widgeon stunned with the feathers messed up on her back in a puddle. And it's a pretty deep puddle, but I just put the pigeon breast away, and he and I went after this duck. And when she tried to get away from me, he grabbed her. And then we went through the same process again. I'm offering him food in order to take him off the duck, and he's letting me take the duck away and looking at something else. And there's a drake widgeon in the next puddle over. And we get that one. And then go through it again. And the last one, the fourth duck from one flight, is a hen gadwall. And I've got 4 live ducks in my bag. It was absolutely the most incredible thing that you could ever tell the story and know that nobody's going to believe you. So that's only half the story. A few days later, at the same pond, but things are drying out. And so the granite bottom stream is now mostly dry. The puddles are still there, but the low spots, I mean, the spots that are not covered by as much water, what had been covered by 2 inches of water, is now just granite, wet granite, instead of being a puddle. And this time it's a flock of all ringneck ducks. Same setup. He's up nice. He's in control of the situation. And I flush, and he comes down on him, and 6 ringnecks bailed in front of him. He only hit one, but I picked up him on the one and 5 dead ringneck ducks that had slammed themselves right into the granite. So I picked up 6 ducks from one flight. A few days later, beating the 4 ducks, which was actually a much better flight because he actually hit them. But he so intimidated these ducks that they killed themselves trying to get away.
Yeah, you're right. I can understand why not very many people would believe that. Did you have, so there was no witnesses to this at all?
No, but I did. So I'm confessing to a minor little crime here.
Uh-huh.
With the 4 ducks,
mm-hmm.
which were alive, all 4 were alive. And my bird is just, happily eating a pigeon breast, what I call breast and wing combo, where you tear the pigeon breast off by the wing and have that as a unit.
Sure.
Plus it sounds like KFC, breast and wing combo. And so I've got these 4 ducks. And so I call up a buddy, and I said, Mikey, I've got 4 live ducks. Do you have a place for me to put them? And he said, oh yeah, I'm over at my father-in-law's. He's got room in his chicken and duck pen. Bring them on over. And they were having a family party. And so I brought over these 4 live ducks, which then wound up getting used by 4 different falconers come next fall. They were in the pen for the whole year. And it's not that common to have exotic ducks, something other than mallards, to be able to use for baggies. And since they were having a party and they'd all eaten and they had piles of food and they insisted that I come and eat, and I ate things that I have never eaten anywhere else, including chitlins, which is fried parts that that I didn't know exactly what they were, but it tasted pretty good.
Hey, that's part of life. It's part of enjoying life, is to try a bunch of stuff that you never had nor may ever have again.
So I sort of have a witness. That is, I did have the ducks alive to show that part. So I have another story, which I have told before, printed, actually, which is when I was flying Pepper, who was the first Aplomado falcon flown in North America in falconry that I knew about. It turned out later I found out that there were a whole lot of guys who had tried them, but not openly, not that their friends knew about, either because they were privately working on a deal to try and breed them, or because it was or because what they were doing wasn't entirely legal how they were doing it. But I didn't know about the people who had previously tried Aplomados in the United States. This was the year 2000. And so I was borrowing one of the birds that had been brought on the initial importation by Doug Alton with the assistance of Jim Nelson. Brought them in captive bred from Peru. And what happened, how I wound up getting this bird to be able to fly it, is that I had helped Doug with some of the logistics, and I'd gone with him to pick the birds up from quarantine at the San Ysidro border crossing where they'd been quarantined. And these birds, of which this is one, became the breeding stock of all the Aplomado falcons that you see everybody flying now in America. And I've been keen on Aplomado falcons ever since I was a kid, and read the translation from the French where they talk about the Elite falcon, and you do other research and you can come to the conclusion that they're talking about the Aplomado falcon, and that they were so great that when the conquistadors brought them home to Spain, and that people loved flying them so much that nobody had one long enough to take the time to make a painting of it, so that we weren't sure 100% that the Aplomado falcon was the Elite. But anyway, so I've got one of these birds, and I just am flying it. And I took advice from Harry McElroy, who had flown them in Mexico and in Peru when he had gone there to live and flown the birds. And he gave some advice, which I followed. He said that they don't like to be hooded, and that what the Peruvian guys say is that you can hood them or you can hunt them, but you can't do both. And I thought, like most people do, I thought, well, I know how to hood a bird, and Harry just doesn't like to hood birds. So I tried hooding the bird. The bird hated it. I stopped. And I believe that the reason why I had great success with this bird, where other people had never even reported on their experience with Aplomado falcons, is because I completely dispensed with trying to hood the bird. I didn't worry about trying to get the bird used to hooding. I just didn't hood it. And I believe that's the real key to success with Aplomado falcons, is don't hurt their feelings by trying to teach them something they don't want to do. But the story I want to get to is the pheasant, the first pheasant that she caught. So, and I had the same, Manfred, I had at the same time, this bird that I was just saying had caught, killed 6 ducks in one stoop, that I was out in the Davis area, and it was getting toward dark, and I parked, and around a stack of hay bales, there was about 50 feet from the car, there was a rooster pheasant strutting, and the Aplomado falcon, not hooded, on a perch, able to look out of the van, and she's bobbing her head and jumping on the end of her jess on the perch, like she wants to go after this cock pheasant. And she's 333 grams. And we'd already flown, and she'd caught a yellow-bellied bird. And she just wants to go, and I've got the telemetry on her. So I said to myself, or actually I said it out loud to her, I said, "Okay, you silly bird, you want to fight with a pheasant? Here you go." And I let her go. And she went right after this guy. And this pheasant looks up at her like, "There's a giant kestrel. I'm not afraid of that." but she was actually going at him. So he flew just like 40 feet. He flew away from her, and she followed him, and she was getting serious. And so he took off, and I watched, and he put down, there was a harvested hayfield. It was actually Sudan grass, which is it's a very thick, tall grass that they use the hay to manufacture, mixing with alfalfa to make alfalfa pellets. And so there was this piece that was like a mohawk sticking up, a piece that was missed that made there were a couple of these spots in the field that made cover. And so the pheasant put down in it, and now I'm watching with binoculars because my bird is still chasing this pheasant that's like 5 times bigger than her. And she kept flying above him. He's running back and forth through the mohawk piece of cover, and she keeps diving at him and going back up, and she's like, she's hovering, but it's like, it's not like kestrel hovering. It's just staying above and dipping to attack. And then she goes down and doesn't come up. And there's no scuffle. There's no fighting where a big giant cock pheasant is kicking off a little bird. It just stops. And now it's getting late. So I jump in the van and I drive up the dirt road, the farm road, to where I think it is. And I've lost perspective. So first I go to the wrong mohawk. There's a couple of them in the field, and the telemetry tells me that I'm wrong. And so I go running over to, another 150 feet over is the next spot. And I get there, and she's there. She's standing on the back of the motionless pheasant who has stuck his head into a tussock of hay, that he's hiding his head like an ostrich hiding, and he's just not moving. And I know enough about pheasants to know that if I do anything sudden, he's going to come out of his torpor and he's just going to blast off. And he really is too strong for the bird to hold. And Aplomado falcons don't grab hold like you could have a Cooper's hawk this size that attacks a pheasant, and they just hang on and rodeo it. Aplomado falcons don't do that. He put in and she's on him. And she was just like plucking a few feathers off his back is all. And so I get there, she's there, and I kneel down. I get closer and closer to where my hand is only 4 inches from him. And then I grab him by the shoulder, get the wing between my first and second finger and my thumb around it. And I grab hold so that this sucker is not going to get away from me. And I then scoop him up and put him in my bag, because my bird when I got hold of him, my bird just steps out of the way, like, thanks for doing that. And she's like, have you got a sparrow or something for me to eat? And so I say that because I had a sparrow to feed her. I picked her up and I fed her, and I've got this incredible experience that's just running around my head. And included among the things running around my head is the fact that nobody's going to believe me. Nobody in their right mind is going to believe this story that just happened to me.
I think everybody's got, it's been in falconry for at least a little bit, though, has at least one of those stories. Just some are fortunate enough to have witnesses at least, and others not so much.
Well, most of my best stories, the only witness is the bird.
Well, and it really just kind of comes down to, like, how much is it really important to you what other people think or what they know anyway? There's a lot of people that don't, and there's a lot of people that live and thrive by, the attention they get from others and stuff too. And if you don't care, then you don't care. I mean, you saw it. So,
well, Yeah, that's part of the problem is I do care.
All right. Well, start wearing a GoPro, man.
Yeah, this was 2000. GoPros were, I don't know if they even existed yet.
Well, they do now.
Yeah, that's true. Well, but now we don't have wild pheasants to hunt. And that year, okay, so I'll go on with the rest of the part that I've actually had people after I wrote about it, and it was published in International Falconer. I had people come up to me at meets and just tell me to my face that I'm a that I'm a lying bastard for saying that I was doing that. Because what I did that season is I actually had 5 fields that I could go to and just look and find pheasants that you could see them visually, and then let the falcon go to start the flight and wind up catching a pheasant. And she got 24 pheasants, most of them roosters, by the way, most of them roosters. And as far as being 5 times the weight, that pheasant, that first one, was 1,600 grams. It was not a small pheasant. She didn't select for hens. She would catch hens, but that was only if that's what we found. And the typical flight on pheasants. Oh, and I should say, we were well into the season that I'd been flying this bird and catching little stuff and having lots of days when I came home satisfied with having chased flocks of blackbirds without catching anything. Lots of unsuccessful days where I was perfectly satisfied, especially because when she didn't catch anything, I could go home when I wanted to, because I would just call her in and put her in the car. And the problem I had been having with her, the problem that lots of people have with Aplomado falcons, is that she would catch a bird that she could carry, something sparrow or starling sized, anything smaller than a pigeon. She would just decide that she's going to eat it, and I have to wait until she's done. And that could take hours. I got to where I couldn't fly her on a before going to work kind of situation, because there was no quickie with her. You had to plan that she's going to succeed in catching something, and then you have to wait until she eats the whole thing, and then she comes and you can go home. And it could take 2-3 hours. And so it was a sort of a pain in the ass situation. Mm-hmm. That when she caught the pheasant, I got to go home. And so we caught a couple dozen pheasants because I went out looking for pheasants, because she would catch them and then I could take her home or go fly the peregrine and then go home. But the way that, and I'm flying the first one, there isn't anybody to tell me, to give me tips about what to do. Like, I can explain to people now, 25 years later, how you manage the carrying with an Aplomado falcon, and so that you're able to catch something and have the bird back in your hands 5 minutes later. But at that time, I would go to a place where there's pheasants that I can, and these are totally wild pheasants. She wasn't interested in baggies. I'll talk about that in a minute. She would see the pheasant and she would just go for it, chase right after it. And the typical flight, we would see pheasants in a piece of cover that was maybe within 30 meters of the car where I park, and that that she would go after them, and they would take off, and she'd be following them, and she's not necessarily trying to overtake them. She's pressuring them enough so that they'll go into cover. It's not a goshawk that's going to snatch it in the air. And there are plenty of people who've been totally dissatisfied with flying Aplomado falcons because they don't catch anything in the air, or virtually, it's very rare for the thing to be in the air when it gets caught. and people can call it rat hunting. I call it catching stuff. That it might be a quarter to a third of a mile to the piece of cover that the pheasant flies to, which is kind of an ideal distance for a pheasant. They have an explosive amount of energy to get there. And so I would just take off running with my fat behind in boots with a pinio vest on. I'm running as fast as I can because if she's got it, she's going to need help. And I want to get there besides. But what will typically happen is I get partway there, maybe even almost there, and it busts out in front of her, and the flight goes on to another piece of cover a third of a mile away, and I'm running, and I'm on the inside of the box, as far as it's not going on away, it's going, out to the right of where we started, of where the put in was. And the pheasant will put into the next thick piece of cover, whether it's blackberries or cattails. And then she'll be going after it. Sometimes she'll have caught it there. But usually what happens is I'm running and I'm huffing and puffing and I'll see them bust out. And this is one of the coolest things about the predictability is that the pheasant will now, having put in twice, it's aiming for the first piece of cover that it had initially come out of. That's its favorite spot to be, that it's going to try and put in there. But it's a pheasant, where the Aplomado falcon is a falcon, and she virtually has an unlimited amount of energy to just keep doing her thing with flying. The kind of energy that allows falcons to just fly all day. But pheasants, the third time that the pheasant bursts and comes out of the cover and flies, by the time it puts in, it's just exhausted, and she's on it and she grabs it. And then I'm huffing and puffing and I get there, and me and the pheasant are exhausted. She's not, and she has the pheasant. And we could do this a whole mile of flying and succeeding in catching a huge quarry, and all done in 15 minutes. I would repeat that. And the reason it's so funny to think about the fact that I was doing the most incredible falconry that I could do because of the fact that I was looking for something she couldn't carry.
Yeah, it's funny when we kind of make certain choices based on, things that I don't know, like it's kind of like, kestrels and starlings. Sure, every so often you'll get a kestrel that's big enough and might be able to carry off a starling, maybe not so much when it's fighting or whatever, but that, I guess there are certain ways you can kind of circumvent.
Right. I mean, and people who are flying kestrels, they really focus on starlings, and part of the reason is that if you're catching sparrows, then the kestrel is catching the sparrow, and then you have to wait until it's done eating in order to call it in and go home. And it can take a long time for a bird to eat all that it wants.
Well, yeah, I mean, it freaking pluck forever,
Uh-huh.
and so,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot to be said for picking up new tricks and techniques and just being a more well-rounded individual and learning those methods for anti-carrying and things like that and stuff too. But
Yeah, well, I could fill your entire episode of why all the ideas that people have for anti-carrying with an Aplomado falcon work great for a Merlin and don't work for an Aplomado falcon. And the best technique, in my opinion, which I have not done because I'm not a Merlin all the time guy. I've done one Merlin and didn't have great success with it, but I've been out with lots of guys who have success with Merlins. And the best thing with Merlins is when they cache, where they just, instead of eating it, they go somewhere that they might be going to eat it, but then you get their attention and stir up more sparrows, and they leave the sparrow sitting on the branch where they were standing, and they come to chase the next one. And what was really cute was actually the first time I saw somebody doing this, after having read about it, actually. But I went out with a prominent guy whose name I'll leave out, but you can guess who it is in my area. That there's a pair of ravens that just watched us hawk and just waited for the cache, and then would casually go over and take the sparrow, and the pair would go and eat it together. They shared, but they were just waiting for the merlin. They didn't bother the merlin at all. They just waited until it cached. And so then we didn't have to worry about the merlin flying back to her perch and getting the sparrow and eating, because the ravens had already cleaned up while we were catching the second one and the third one, and we caught a fourth one.
Yeah, I can definitely see that happen for sure. Yeah, there's so many little quirks. I mean, wild birds that are completely wild still catch on so fast to certain things. I mean, there's been plenty of times where we kicked up rabbits and watched wild, juvenile red tails come and follow us, watch us hunting, and then come follow in the fun too. And we've kicked up rabbits before for wild birds to catch just for the heck of it and things like that. It's funny what these birds pick up on, even the wild ones.
So you stimulate one of my best wild bird stories, which is I was out in Southern California when we lived down there, flying by Lake Hodges. That was a great spot for bunnies. It's actually, for anybody who lives down there, it's across from North County Fair Mall, and parked by the tennis courts. And as soon as you leave the tennis courts parking lot, you're hawking already. And so we're over the hill, and there was a hag female redtail standing in a totally dead snag. She's, she looks like a painting of a redtail standing in a dead tree. And she's just watching us, me and the Harris hawk. And the Harris hawk gets tired chasing this rabbit, but the rabbit is still in plain view. And I'm just a little bit disappointed that although she tried and she chased for it, she didn't get up and keep going for it when it was clearly still in sight. And with the rabbit still running, now the redtail left her perch and burned it down. And when that redtail hit that bunny, there was no scream. It was pounded. And the Harris hawk and I watched this happen, even though she's like, 100 feet away from me where she ended the flight. And I'm just watching. She's on the hillside. The redtail and the rabbit are on another part of the hillside, and I'm down below, so I've got a perfect view. So I take the Harris hawk and I get away and not bother the redtail with her meal, because it'd be completely natural for any hawk that sees this to want to go and rob the redtail that caught something. So I get out of that area and finish my day and come back hawking a day or two later, and there's the redtail sitting on the same perch, but she's got like a volleyball of a crop. and so I knew exactly where she had caught it. So the Harris hawk and I went and looked at the spot where the kill had been made, and you've got blood, and you've got the stomach set aside, you've got the nose with the whiskers, but the skull is gone, but just the nose and whiskers are left, and the feet. She had ripped it apart and eaten everything except the feet, the nose, and the stomach. And I kept going back there, partly because I wanted to watch the progress. She was just sitting in that tree digesting rabbit. it took a whole week during which we watched the crop get smaller and smaller until she was sitting there with the crop down and she was obviously ready to go. But she had eaten the whole rabbit and taken the whole week to digest it.
Yeah, I mean, when they have those giant uniboob crops like that, yeah, it takes a minute.
Oh, this was a Dolly Parton uniboob.
Nice. Well, good for that bird. You know, it had an easy week.
Yeah, so there's so many elements to that, including the part that actually sticks in my brain the most is how the Harris hawk actually just let the red tail have her time and didn't get involved when she could have.
Well, you know, I mean, they're not dumb. That's another big bird to tussle with. I mean, no reason to tussle whenever you know you're going to get another meal eventually anyway. So,
well, and she was also, she really liked to chase too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another interesting. So I don't usually hunt with a dog, but when we live down there and I'm flying the Harris hawk, and my wife, who's not into hunting and, doesn't want to see any blood, but she wanted to go with me with the Harris hawk. And so I set things up so that the Harris hawk is primed, that I'll be able to take the rabbit away alive and keep my wife from being upset by there being death. So I'm going to do a catch and take away alive, and then my wife will get to see the rabbit released after the bird is back in the car. But the interesting part is that this hawk that did not particularly like dogs, my wife wanted to bring along the 9-month-old female boxer that we had at the time, Capri. And it was like, well, let's try it. I'm humoring the wife all along that I was really skeptical about taking my wife to see the hunting at all, because it's a sore spot between us for 40 years. And so we take the dog, we go to this same field that I was talking about that's across from the mall, and we get a ways into the field, and a rabbit bumps in front of the dog, and the hawk chases it, and the dog watches, and the dog was like, that was the coolest thing. And she looks at the hawk, and she watches the hawk come back around and get into position. And then as soon as she sees that the hawk is ready on my fist, she runs around like crazy to find a rabbit. You don't think of a boxer as, any kind of a hunting dog, but she finds the scent. She finds where she's close to a rabbit. She looks at the bird, sees that it's ready, flushes the rabbit, and then watches the hunt as the hawk goes and catches the rabbit. The dog knew in 15 seconds of experience, that dog learned what it takes an entire season to teach a person about timing and the hawk's role and the how you have to flush when the bird is looking and all that. And just to finish the story, the exciting part is over in the story, but that I follow my plan, which is to run like crazy to get to the hawk as soon as she catches. And, Harris hawks, not to say that I'm fast, I'm a really slow runner, but Harris hawks don't fly that fast and rabbits don't really run that fast. The catching has as much to do with skill and coordination as it does to speed. And, fast birds like goshawks actually just kind of may make it more boring. So I'm actually, when the rabbit got caught, I'm like only 12 feet behind. So as soon as it's caught, I'm right there, and I've got my glove between uh, the rabbit's head and the bird's feet, so that I can get her transferred off it, get the rabbit away alive, and and happily have succeeded in taking my wife out to see falconry without doing anything that upset her, and then letting the rabbit go after we've put the dog and the bird back in the car. And then there was this complication that that night she tells me that she wants to go again the next day. And this Harris hawk, you could do a catch and release, but only once in a while. And after you had done it once, she's going to be really pissed if you try and do it a second time in a row. So I explained to my wife that, look, if you come along, then the rabbit's going to die this time, because the bird's not going to let me take it away alive, which I went to great efforts for you to not see the rabbit die. She said, okay, I'm okay with that. Well, when it actually happened that we succeeded in catching a rabbit we went to a completely different field, the water district owned land in Ramona, that I'm coming down, I'm running down a hill to get to where the hawk has the rabbit and it's screaming, and I'm about to stretch the rabbit, and I hear from my wife, "Save the rabbit! Save the rabbit!" And so I'm like, okay, bird, you don't get to kill this one. And I saved the rabbit. The bird forgave me. The wife was not mad. And fortunately, the wife did not want to go again the third day in a row.
Well, yeah, small victories, I guess. Every so often things work out, but...
Well, and I have absolutely no problem with my old friends who were around to know about when that happened, who teased me by yelling, "Save the rabbit, Karl!"
I've got a couple of funny stories that are somewhat similar to that, just with a different animal, but we won't get into that. But
I was going to say, why don't you throw that into this podcast? Let's hear your story this time.
the one I'm thinking of, I can't really tell. But anyway,
we're not at the statute of limitations yet. You've only been doing this a while.
Yeah, no, I mean, it doesn't really even have anything to do with statute of limitations. It's
okay.
Just, it's one of those things where, yeah, there's just, there's just certain things that you're better off just not sharing, except for with in person, in close circles. That story is one of them, but, but at any rate, I do, before we do get any further though, I still need to get your, how you got, into all this. You basically tell the story of how you discovered it and got into it and falconry.
Well, it's the most normal story for falconry, which is every child every normal child, I should say, every normal child is a little amateur herpetologist. The difference between me and the normal kid is that my dad was a PhD herpetologist who taught environmental studies at the university. And so I had knowledge and experience that, of course, being a precocious child who's, obsessed with the hobby, an interest, like some kids with trains and lots of us with herps, that I knew a whole lot. But even though my dad was a herpetologist, he wouldn't let me fill the house with snakes. We had 2 snakes in 1 cage, and that was all that I had at home. And he didn't want me, as I say, filling the house with snakes. So I started volunteering at the Sacramento Science Center and Junior Museum in 1977, when I was just turning 12. And the reason I wanted to be there was because they had 45 herps included in their display cases. And so I started there as a junior curator, and I loved it. Being a zookeeper is the perfect job as far as just having something where you just want to be there doing it. And I was volunteering every weekend day, Saturday, Sunday. I wound up winning the Youth Volunteer of the Year award for Sacramento County 3 years running, while I was volunteering every weekend at the Junior Museum. But the experience I got was that, I went there because I was into the herps, but then I discovered the owls and the hawks, and I was just, wow, this is even better. And so I was totally hooked, and I just had to do that. I decided within a couple months of when I started volunteering at the Junior Museum, I was had decided that I'm going to be a falconer. And at that time, so I rode my bike to the Region 2 of the California Department of Fish and Game, which has recently been renamed to California Department of Fish and Wildlife, but it was Fish and Game. And I rode my bike to the office and asked for the falconry regulations, which was 3 pages front and back, dittoed. If anybody listening knows what it means from the ditto machine, where you have this really lousy printing that's blue print on white paper, and that's how the regulations were. The falconry license was $15, but the worst thing was that you had to be 16 to get a falconry license. And I absolutely did not break the rules and have a bird illegally, which I found out after I got a falconry license, after I was 16. I found out that everybody else, they just either did it without a license, or their mom or their dad went and got a license so that they could do it. I'm the only one I know who actually waited. And, I read everything. I had the regulations memorized. What I didn't know, that I found out about 10 years ago, is that over in Nevada, which is only 120 miles from where I grew up, that the regulations allowed the minimum federal standard regulation, which was you only have to be 12 by the federal regulations. It never occurred to me that California had a different regulation than what it could have had, and that I could have gotten a Nevada license at 12 and got to start earlier. But in fact, I waited until I was 16 and got my California license. And so basically, I consider falconry to be one of the advanced stages of herpetology. There are just a bunch of things that happen to the young herpetologist who doesn't lose interest in herpetology. Either you become an expert in your local species, or you may become an expert in one local species or one exotic species, or you get into breeding. And among breeders, you may do one species and go big with it, or you may, as a breeder, you want a pair of as many different species as you can get, or you get into giant herps, or you get into hots. You may get into one species of hots. You may get into all species of hots. You may be looking for the most dangerous thing you can get. You may be looking for whatever's illegal, or you may be looking for everything that is legal. There's these different ways that people go, or people that they start out as herpetologists just like I did. Every kid is a is a kid finding bugs and lizards and snakes, and they may wind up training chimps or big cats or, all these things in the animal kingdom and in the animal professions all come from the same root of a kid lifting up a board and seeing what's underneath. So my back to a synopsis of the answer to your question is that I feel like I started out the same way as every other falconer, that I was a child herpetologist who discovered hawks and owls and said, I've got to do that. And to be fair and honest about, how I am with my falconry, and to be fair to people who don't, who aren't really that driven to falconry, is that I did not come at this saying, I want to hunt with a falcon. I came at this, which I think is completely normal, to I want a pet hawk. And the only legal way to have a pet hawk in California is to have a falconry license. And with a falconry license, it specifically, and I believe in violation of our general rights, says that you have to hunt with your falconry bird in order for it to be legitimate and to keep your license, which I think that's totally wrong. But it is what I do, so it's hard to argue very much. I just, on a philosophical basis, I think it's completely wrong not to let American citizens do whatever they want with their animals, and especially to let them be as lazy as they want.
Well, and I guess this would be a good time then. This was something I was actually going to bring up with you, because I have seen, since we are like friends on Facebook and stuff like that, I have seen you get into kind of, debates or discussions with people about different things, that I could tell that you do have some strong opinions on, as far as, but, I figured this would be a good topic to kind of discuss a little bit and then kind of come to a close of the overall conversation. But before we, like I said, we basically, have these rules and we have these regulations. One thing that I've noticed, when I've talked to folks and, other friends in other countries that don't have hardly any rules or regulations, or
they all wish they had regulations, right? They're all wrong. They're completely wrong. They have it good. Don't screw it up.
But do they have it good, really?
They have it better than we do by 100 times. So around 45 years ago, the United Kingdom had falconry regulations, falconry licenses, similar to what we have, and had at that time anyway. And the quantity of falconers was between 5,000 and 6,000 in the United Kingdom, which is about 3 times as many per capita as North America had, between 5,000 and 6,000 licensed falconers at that time. But they decided that it was it was a violation of their citizens' rights to be telling people what they can and cannot do and requiring them to have licenses for owning their pets. And so they eliminated the need for licensing in the United Kingdom. And since then, we don't even know how many people there are, but it's somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million raptor keepers, no license required, that it's grown as people can get whatever they want, that they have the right to do what they want. Now, the number of people who actually practice falconry the way we talk about it as falconry is still probably in the 5,000 to 10,000 across that country. But everyone there has the right to do what they want. And that's the advantage they have. Every one of them has the right. They're not limited by a mandatory apprenticeship, and they're not limited by the government saying they're going to take away the license. They're not afraid, like we falconers are in America, that at any moment that our state could decide not to issue falconry licenses, and that we should all just dispose of our birds. And if we don't, they'll come confiscate and euthanize all our birds. That we worry about that as citizens in America, where we're supposed to be the free ones. And here's the big kicker. The kicker that every guy in England who wants regulations like California has, he needs to shut up, because what they have is 5 or 10 incidents a year of mistreatment of raptors. And in America, among the 5 or 6,000 licensed falconers, we have 5 or 10 mistreatments a year, which means that we are 100 times worse on a per capita basis with licenses. And I can even explain to you why we are worse. It's because of the ego of humans, that when the government gives you a license that reads master on it, you think you know everything because the government told you know everything. And so you can't tell that guy anything about, you got to clean your mews, or why do you have so many birds, or why don't you fly your birds? All the questions that you would ask somebody to try and get them to improve their falconry. The answer is, my license says I'm a master. You should shut up about it.
So, I don't know, just devil's advocate, a little
go
bit
ahead.
of pushback is, just because, these animals in particular, just because people can own them, I mean, doesn't mean that they should own them. And, as far as that goes, as well as I do, these animals do require, kind of a different level and a different knowledge base, for upkeeping and maintaining good health and stuff. The only thing I'm curious about, though, is like, these, as far as like, say, the UK, for example. I mean, the last stats that I saw when I was doing my research to a degree on this topic was, because I know UK is roughly around the same size of Oregon. As far as actual bird of prey owners, not using the term falconer, right, but like people that own birds of prey in the UK, I saw it was somewhere between like 20 to 25,000 people or something like that actually own some form of bird of prey or species or whatever.
There are so many people who have barn owls that, my little side business is I sell chicks that I get from the hatchery, and I sell to falconers. I ship them out. I would like to say that there are so many raptor keepers in England that I could fill a freezer wagon on wheels and drag it from house to house and sell hawk food to every third house. But what's most important about it is not the number. The fact is that it's many times more than there are in America. That there's no debate about. That is, I say that there's close to 1 million. You say there's only 25,000. I don't disagree with you on that.
And neither of us know what the exact number is.
That's the whole point. That's my whole point, is that the government doesn't know who has the animals. And so you don't have to worry about the government coming and confiscating your animals because they know where you are. In America, they know exactly where I am. If they decide to come after me, I can't hide.
I mean, but once again, the thing is, though, is that's not 100% completely accurate either, though, because the government over there not too long ago was trying to just make sure nobody could have any animals, period.
But that is
different rules.
So let me follow along with your subject line, which is the PETA type. I don't think they call them PETA in the UK. We call them PETA here because it's the actual organization. Animal rights activists are trying to shut down all animal ownership and want everyone to be vegetarian. They don't even want there to be ranching. They don't even want people eating cows, much less having pet hawks and owls. And in America, there is a much greater chance and danger of the animal rights activists succeeding in outlawing falconry because we are all under the thumb of our licenses. That if the animal rights activists succeed in outlawing it, they will be able to come after us and get rid of us. Whereas if there were no license and nobody knew who's a falcon owner and who isn't, then it would be 100 times harder for the animal rights activists to have their way. We are falling right into their trap. And having a license does absolutely zero to prove that you have an ability that justifies you having falconry birds. And the fact that we have a few incidences in America every year of licensed falconers and licensed rehabbers getting busted for mistreatment, and that it's an approximately the same quantity of incidents in the U.S. where we have licenses as they have in the UK where no license is required to do it, means that the license does nothing positive to help us and protect our rights.
Well, by that same argument, though, that doesn't necessarily mean that license or no license, that there's not more, of numbers of people doing bad or good one way or the other, is if you're monitoring it or not. There could be more over there too. It's just not, reported, as well. The argument can go both ways, just from my rationale and my logical way of thinking. But
from a perspective of hearing, okay, so I'm not a very complicated person. That back in the 80s, when I was belonging to the California Hawking Club and to NAFA and getting the newsletters, and I'm believing every word of it. I was completely, the attitude about trying to discourage everybody that wants to get into it, and only, that you try and make it difficult for anybody to get into it, and that we need licenses, and that the regulations should be tightened up and even stronger than they were, which were ridiculously difficult, where I don't know if you even realize that until recently, master falconers, the highest license level, could only have 3 birds total, including captive bred birds. That is just a violation of our rights. Yeah, it's hard to believe that Americans even think that we're a free country when you have laws like that. Every idiot who wants to be an idiot falconer should be allowed to be an idiot falconer instead of being required to be an idiot non-falconer. It's about the rights of others. It's not about what I get to do. I'm really not worried about losing my ability to be a falconer. I'm worried about losing the ability of other American citizens to be free in America. And now, one point I do want to make is that, in general, in the UK, you can't have wild birds. However, they do have a system that you can request a trapping permit and get a sparrowhawk, goshawk, or peregrine.
Yeah, but they're almost never
nobody asked for it.
Say nobody.
And you do have to present evidence justifying as that you actually have falconry experience. That is, they do have the limitation that the citizen who is not already a raptor keeper cannot start being a raptor keeper by getting a wild bird. Okay, so part of your argument is true, but I do want to make the point that in the United Kingdom, it is not out of the question for them to get wild birds. Plus, now this is the downside of everybody having whatever they want, is that if you want a Harris hawk that has the experience of having been wild for a year, there's plenty of them out there in the United Kingdom, more than we have in California, even, to go and get yourself a relatively wild Harris hawk, because all of the captive bred birds that are lost are open season to go catch.
Yeah, I mean, if they're initially captively bred and they're invasive, technically,
Actually,
or non-native.
if they're either wearing a closed band indicating that they were captive bred or that they're invasive. That is, if you see a Harris hawk in the United Kingdom with no band on it, you can still trap it because it's a Harris hawk.
Yeah, they're not from there. I mean,
right.
So.
And to be honest, but see, we know different things than what the English know. And so, if I were over there, one of the types of birds that I would fly would be Harris hawks that I would specifically be going after birds that had been out for a while that are like a passage or haggard. But because they're not used to it, those guys aren't actually focusing on that. And part of the reason why there's so many loose is because they, for some reason, a completely normal way of keeping birds is just on a leash in the backyard with no containment area. They have these wonderful contraptions where it's like a doghouse on a post that the bird can jump into and be out of the rain, but they're just, the only thing holding them is their leash. But that's how people kept them when they had licenses too. They didn't keep them any better when licenses were required. There were just less people doing it.
Basically, going back to the whole premise then of just because you can, should you, at least there were less people that were able to have, birds that were, as far as, making mistakes and things like that, or, had a less knowledge base or whatever. I mean, I guess going back to kind of the original, well, I mean, I guess I should just go ahead and ask the question then is, I mean, if you were able to kind of wave a magic wand and kind of have things completely the way you ideally would see them, what would your solution be? Because I mean, at least like, as far as like Germany goes, for example, like the Falconers I just talked to recently in Germany, at least you have to pass a test, have some degree of knowledge base and stuff to show that you're actually at least have some degree of knowledge and able to even have the animals and stuff. I mean, if that's not a great way, if what we're doing is not a great way, if what the UK is doing is not a great way, what's Karl's ideal way?
I see nothing wrong with what's going on in the UK. I see nothing wrong with what's going on in the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. I see nothing wrong with those countries that don't have licenses required. What I do see wrong is that Germany, you make it so difficult that you really, really can't just do it a little bit. You have to be full bore in order to be a German falconer. And so those who get that privilege, they may do it at a very high and productive level. But all the people that don't get to do it are the victims. And the real crux that I want to get to is South Africa. Do you know what the rules are in South Africa? It's that existing falconers have to approve everyone new to get a license. And if you let falconers decide who's going to get to also do the sport, they will shut it down to almost shut out everybody. Yeah, I have this little story that is full of hyperbole, that if you take the average falconer and give him the opportunity where you say, look, here's the deal. We're going to make it so that the only falconry will be that you can have one kestrel When you have a falconry license, you can only have a kestrel and you can only have one. But here's the kicker Bob, the wannabe in control of the regulations. We're going to make it so that you're the only one who gets that license and nobody else will get to do it, just you. But you can only have a kestrel. Every one of those Bobs would do it. Just screw everybody else so that I can be special.
Well, I think there's some other finer points.
There are lots of finer points, but the problem,
glossing over.
The problem is that everyone is a jerk. When given the opportunity, very few people are selfless in their thinking.
Here's the only thing I will say about that line of logic, though, is there's a lot of other, just unfortunately, everybody is born into all kinds of situations and facets of life. I mean, it's not really much different in Mexico either.
The resources to do falconry, the people who are so poor that they don't have a job. That is the perfect person to be a falconer. The one who's unemployed.
They've got the most time, theoretically.
If they can come up with food for their bird, they've got the time. And look at the videos of Pakistani falconers who have wild-taken goshawks that they spend days and days just hanging out, chewing cot, getting totally stoned off their butts on chewing cot and sitting around with their goshawks. And their goshawks are the same kind of goshawks that you will see going nuts on an American falconer's hand. That those birds are perfectly manned and then are great flying when they go to the field. And those guys are poor enough so that there may be 30 guys that go along just with one guy who has a goss, and they go all hunting together and they catch stuff. Trying to keep falconry exclusive is counterproductive on many levels.
Well, I'm going to finish with another thought on that. Though.
Go ahead.
The only thing, once again, though, I will say to that is obviously, Pakistan is a lot different than South Africa in regards to, just how it's laid out, different provinces, all that kind of stuff. Being able to, practice falconry in certain areas obviously is a lot more difficult than it is for whatever. I mean. Once again, there's just so many. I just want it for anybody listening that's not as knowledgeable in how stuff works in other countries and stuff. There's a lot of issues and stuff that overall that are getting glossed over, and factors that need to be considered, obviously, before anybody, poor, rich, or whatever, can even practice falconry anywhere. For someone that might be stumbling into this episode that's not as well versed in falconry, period. Okay. I mean, I think we can both agree on that, right?
Yeah. But I want to make sure that I keep hammering on the part that it's about people's rights to be wrong.
Well, and once again, I'm not poo-pooing necessarily on your ideal or concept that everybody should be able to have the right to do it. But once again, my only rebuttal to that, I guess, in a nutshell, is just because you can doesn't mean that you should.
I have an answer for that whenever you're ready.
Go for it.
So, as I was alluding to earlier, I was an absolute by-the-book, agreeing with everything I was told to agree with, or brainwashed, whatever you want to call it, to the club NAFA perspective of, wanting it to be exclusive and regulations should be stiffened, not loosened, and all these. I was that guy, and because I had started my falconry with the Junior Museum, where they had me as a 12-year-old giving lectures about the animals to the public. I've been dealing with showing wild animals to the public literally since I was 12 years old, and I just turned 60. And And so over the years, I would do school programs. Virtually any teacher friend that asked me to, I would come and, would maybe do a class or maybe do the whole school, or festivals where it's all ages of people, bird festivals or beer festivals or wherever they asked me to, I would come and show birds and talk. And the approach that I took was the standard approved approach. When somebody would, you always, every single time that you do a program, you have somewhere between 2 and 10 people that come up to you afterward and say, I want to do this. And so I used to give the standard company line of, this is way too difficult, you shouldn't do it. Or, a version of that, which is not true. And around 30 years old, I figured out that I was not doing anybody any good by lying to them and telling them that this is too difficult for them. And I also was coming to the realization that I don't have a right to tell a stranger that they shouldn't get to do what I spend all of my time doing and enjoying. So I switched it from telling everybody it's too difficult to every one of those people that came up to me after a program, I would tell them, you can do this if you want to do it. Just contact the Fish and Game and ask for a falconry packet and they'll send it to you, and that you follow the instructions and you can do this. And so I flipped it, and the exact same number of people wound up doing it, which is about 1 in 100 contacts would actually progress to being a falconer, being an apprentice. And of the apprentices, about a third drop out besides. And the big point to get here is that when I switched it from telling people no to telling people yes, that doesn't have any real effect on whether or not they're going to do it. Trying to tell them no, the only people that don't do it when you tell them no, but they want to do it, the only people that follow through are the kind of unpleasant people who don't listen to what you told them. That is, if you tell people no, then the nice people will take your no as a no, and you just ruined their opportunity to do it because you told them not to, and they did what you said. So that's why everyone who is a falconer is such a jerk, because every one of them is somebody who didn't take no for an answer. If you want there to be any nice people in the sport, you gotta say yes to the nice people.
Well, once again, I'm going to cut in and just make the one comment, though, that I know, like, there are some falconers, of course, that I've heard tell people, no, you really can't do this. I think everybody's heard probably somebody say that, whether or not the context is in the same, whatever mindset that you might think that really is. That's another conversation entirely. But what I tell people that are interested, and this is like most of my friends, the people that I know very well, also tell people, is it is possible to do this. It is, something that you can do, but, once again, kind of a little bit of a spin of what you're basically telling people also is that, yes, you can do this, but it's a big responsibility and it's also not for everybody. You should get out with some other people that are doing it. These are the steps that you have to take to be able to do it. But, and I always tell people there's a lot of people that think that they want to do this, that see what it takes to maintain and have these animals and stuff, that decide that it's not for them. And that's really for you to decide. But you need to kind of see what it's like before you have it set in your head that, there's lots of things in my life that I thought I wanted to do. And then when I saw what was involved, decided, you know what? Probably not for me. And that's what I usually tell people is it's no different with falconry. So, as far as, there's a lot of people that I don't necessarily hear people tell them, no, you can't do this. It's, you should think strongly before you do this. Just to piggyback off your thought.
I got a story for you. So, I told you about how I started with the Junior Museum, and I spent every weekend there, plus vacation time. And, I was just totally into it and all. And then when I was 16 and then getting an actual falconry license and had a driver's license, then I started spending lots of time driving half an hour from where I lived up to Loomis, where Jimmy Adamson had his falcon breeding project, in order to learn from Jimmy and be around the birds. And, there were a couple of years during which basically I did all his chores around the place. And I would be there even when he wasn't there, taking care of his animal chores. And fast forward a dozen years after that, when I was flying, actually, this is flying Manfred, that same bird I was talking about at the beginning, where, and in the same neighborhood where I had those great flights. This guy saw me getting out of the car with the Falcon and stopped to chat, and he seemed to be really knowledgeable. So I said, "Hey, why don't you just come with me and we'll talk while the bird's flying?" And because at this particular spot, it's like a 15-minute walk from where I park to where I'm actually flushing. And what I do in that case is let the bird go at the car, and the bird is flying and waiting for me the entire time that I'm walking. And that allows the bird to get to, as much pitch as he thinks he needs for that slip. So it turns out that this was the guy that, oh, and by the way, people who know Jimmy Adamson, realize how he used people who were interested, and I was referred to as one of Jimmy's slaves. So this is the guy who had been Jimmy's slave before I started doing all of his chores for him. This was the guy who was a couple years older than me and had been at the same stage I had been when I was 16, like when he was 18, he had been at that stage where he was about to really be doing falconry. But in his case, he first, while he was working at Jimmy's, he was going to wait until he finished high school. So then he decided he's going to wait until after he finished college. And then during college, he got married. And so he was going to wait a little bit longer. And at the point where he met up with me and we went out in the field and hunted together, and I realized who this guy is, whom I had never met before, but that we had all this in common, the Jimmy Adamson connection, that at that time he was wanting to wait until his kids are a little older. And then a dozen years after that, I saw him helping out at the registration tables from the California Hawking Club as a pre-apprentice, prospective apprentice who was, when I chatted with him, he's just waiting until his grandchildren get a little bit older. And he hadn't done it yet. The whole lifetime passed by. He's trying to follow the instructions that falconers are giving, that you should wait until you're ready. He lost his whole life. He might as well have been in prison, because he never got to do falconry. And he still hasn't done it, as far as I know.
And, but would he still have gotten to do it even with no other guidance help?
He had all the guidance. He was fully qualified. he had learned and read the books and knew the regulations, and he had spent a couple years being tutored by Jimmy and working as a helper in the breeding project. The guy was more qualified than most Falconers master license in their pocket are today.
Did he take his test?
I don't know about that.
Did he do any of the other steps?
No, he was waiting. He was waiting. And he's still waiting. And he should be dead by now.
Okay, well, why is he still waiting? Like, why did he wait so long?
Because we told him to wait. Because the system that people are promoting now is don't do it until you're really ready and you're sure that you're ready. I have the opposite attitude, which is, well, actually, let me give you an example of an apprentice that I sponsored for 1 year. She's a nurse practitioner, highly intelligent lady. She wanted to do it. I sponsored her. She did everything right. This was one of the smartest people you could ever meet. And not just smart, but highly organized and everything. She's exactly who you do not say no to. Owning her own house with a couple of acres and the whole bit. And I didn't make it difficult for her to get into it. She did everything right. And when it came time to renew, to go into the second year, she wrote me a letter that I both treasure and hate at the same time, which is, she told me, thanks for the opportunity. You've been the best sponsor I could ask for. It's been a great experience. I'm not going to do it anymore. She is exactly the reason why we should let people do what they want. Because they'll make the right decision if you just don't make it hard for them. One of the worst things we do when we tell people no is by the time we finally let them do it, we have made it so high stakes that they can't quit like this lady did.
I guess, just once again, though, being devil's advocate, I just don't know very many people personally, and since I've gotten into falconry, and granted, yes, I haven't been in it that long, comparatively speaking. I just don't know of anybody, though, that would necessarily, quote unquote, keep somebody from doing it if there's a will and show that they really want to do it. And, I just
not to criticize you for having the coolest position that you could have, which is that you are actually in contact with some of the best, most high profile people in the falconry community, so that you're getting an excellent view of the very best and a lot of the very nicest people in falconry, so that you're not seeing the downside. The downside is
I haven't always I haven't always done podcasts,
But still you fell into the enthusiastic real falconer crowd.
I hear a lot of bad stories too, don't get me wrong, and I've seen
another similar story, which is, and this goes directly to you need to be ready and you need to go out with other people and see what you're doing. So the Northern California Hawking Club apprentice chair and his buddy, the former apprentice chair who had sponsored him, and they had for years they had a real control and click on all the incoming falconers and apprenticeship in Northern California. And there was this lady that she spent 5 years going out, kicking brush with them, and getting ready, until it took 5 years until they said, okay, you're ready, we'll sponsor you. Before that, they kept her from getting forward, getting a sponsor and having a license, so that it was in the control of falconers. In fact, it's in the control of the specific falconers that are representing the club as to who gets to get in. So they gave her the approval after 5 years. And they helped her to get a red tail, and she was excited as could be and a little bit scared. And within a week, she hated that bird. And she stuck around for another 5 years. She was a General 3 before she said that she had lost the bird. I don't know if she really lost or if she just let it go, but she no longer had the bird, and we never heard from her again. She waited 5 years, and then she stuck around for 5 years hating it because it was too high stakes, because she had waited 5 years to get into this. But this woman hated falconry once she got to do it. If we just would have let her try it the first week, then she could have just gotten out of it and only spent a week and would have said, yeah, falconers were nice. They helped me get started. I didn't like it. I'm out of it. So you may want to close this up, but I have a whole other subject I wanted to mention, which is, but it's related to this, which is sponsorship. At this point in my life, half of my falconry energies and hobby is being a sponsor. And I'm known for sponsoring everybody or anybody, which is not entirely untrue. But what I do is that I offer sponsorship to anybody who asks. I don't tell anybody no. In fact, before I go on with that, I will tell a little story about the fact that I don't necessarily want to be sponsoring everyone. There was a guy that I had communicated with him by email, and I said yes, I would sponsor him, and he had come to me because he had heard that I would sponsor anybody. But when I met him, I could barely stand to be in the guy's presence. I really did not want to ever see this guy again. But I had promised that I would sponsor him if he needed a sponsor. And so he wanted to go forward with it. I really was hoping that he wouldn't. And I tried to get somebody else to tell him no for me. So what I did was, at that time, I had 5 apprentices, and this was the regulations had just recently changed. The old regulations were you could only sponsor 3 people maximum at any one time. And we had heard, the rumor was that when the new regulations would come out, that you could do 5 instead of 3. And so, without having analyzed the regulations for every little detail, it was just in my head that it was 5, and I was up to 5. And so I told the guy to call Sacramento and talk to License and Revenue about whether or not I could sponsor him. And I was just assuming that they were going to alleviate me of the problem by telling him that Mr. Kerster is sponsored out and can't help you, and then I wouldn't have to deal with the guy. But what happened was that they looked into it. They carefully looked at the regulations. The limit of 5 never made it in. There is no federal limit. And so they told him that, yeah, he could be sponsored by me. And I was like, oh, crap. Fortunately, this is one of the luckiest things in my life that could ever happen, is I never heard from him. When he got told yes, that was good enough, and he disappeared. And even though I hated the guy, I'm glad that his rights were not violated, that he was given the opportunity. I'm also really happy that I didn't have to ever talk to him again. So, but then what happened was, so I had already been spending some effort, and this has to do with the internet allowing communication where people who were trying to come into the sport all wind up in the same place. And so we actually wind up having the opportunity to have a debate where they don't just meet one person who tells them no or who tells them yes and sponsors them, that instead they get to talk to a bunch of people. So I had been, back when the limit was sponsor no more than 3 people, I was very carefully trying to keep from sponsoring more than 2, so that I would always have an open spot for when somebody would come along and say, look, I can't find anybody else. Will you please sponsor me? And then I would be able to. And I sponsored, I was using a system that required me to manipulate people with how much they hate me, which is that I would tell people who want to get into it, look, just go to Bob the Falconer that lives near you, that you want to have sponsor you, and just tell him that if he doesn't sponsor you, that Karl Kerster will. And that would usually get Bob to sponsor her. And then that person would get to be a falconer, and I would reach my goal. Okay. And then the limit went up to 5. And then this guy that I was telling you about made it so that there was no longer any limit. But I was still trying to manipulate other falconers into doing the sponsoring, because I was still brainwashed into thinking that, the person needs to live nearby, and a silly thing that I absolutely disagree with now about that the sponsors should go with the person trapping and for safety, which I absolutely reject now. The person should go out by themselves and succeed in trapping without somebody showing them how to do it. That they have to listen and learn and go practice and have their own success, so that they own their success.
So out of curiosity then, just to kind of summarize or wrap this thought up, and then I am going to have to jump off this. I've got to go run my dogs and other stuff before it gets dark here and everything. And we're almost at 2 hours now, believe it or not. But so where do you think licensure rules and regulations, where do you think they should begin and end? I mean, should there also then not be any licensure or anything like that to be able to practice, in healthcare for people and stuff too? I mean, where's the line drawn in your eyes?
Well, let's stick to where I have expertise, and not test my expertise about medicine. In falconry, what we know from experience is that the more regulations you have, the more regulated you are, but not to the advantage of the animals that are involved. There is no advantage to the falcons of falconry to having the falconer licensed. And that if we were to eliminate all of the regulations, there would be no deterioration in care. The regulations and laws that apply to cruelty to animals would naturally still apply, and would be all the regulations that you need to protect the animals. Okay? The regulations that prevent you from starving your dog would be all the regulations you need for falconry. Okay? Now, I could let it go a little farther. I could say, all right, if you want to own a bird, you don't need a license at all. But if you want to take the bird out and go hunting, that we're going to make you have a hunting license, and we're going to sell you an annual falconry stamp that anybody can buy. Absolutely any citizen who has a hunting license can buy the falconry stamp like a duck stamp, you would have, here's a cute thing for the department to get money, is that you would have thousands of California and nationwide, you would have thousands of people who have hunting licenses who every year they buy all the stamps, even though they don't use them all, and that they would pay the falconry stamp, even though they've never even touched a falcon. And so the department could get more money with no permits required, and that you have a falconry stamp that allows you to go out and use your falconry in the same manner that you use guns or bow and arrow. And which is also contrary, actually, to my contention that that we should not be at all subject to game seasons in falconry, because we are trying to emulate what wildlife does, and that peregrines don't stop hunting ducks on February 4th every year. They don't, and they don't wait until October 21st for the opening of duck season. And there's no reason why people who have falcons should have to only hunt certain things at certain times. Fortunately, we are allowed to hunt sparrows and starlings and pigeons all the time. And thank heavens for those invasive species allowing falconers to be out as many days as they want to be. So to answer your question, we don't need any regulations, but I would be okay with requiring a stamp. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't want people to learn. And okay, so let me say something really, really important, which is, with sponsorship in our current system, we have a couple of really stupid things. Number one, we have a comprehensive test that is designed to flunk as many people as possible, and that the person has to pass it before they can get a license. And then when they pass that test, they now have to go into a mandatory 2-year supervised training program, the apprenticeship time, and that you shouldn't have to pass the exit exam in order to get into the school. If you're going to require the 2 years mandatory training, then nobody should have to pass the test until they want to make general and get out of the apprenticeship. The testing should be at the 2-year mark, and somebody who can't pass the test keeps having a mandatory mentor, rather than that they have to pass the test. The test shows that they know all they need to know. Not that it really does, but theoretically, the test tells you everything.
I see the logic in having the test after.
Okay,
yeah,
so,
I get that.
But the thing is that where you read, and I'm beating around the bush for the more important point, which is, with the current technology, you don't need a sponsor to have a good apprenticeship where you're mandated to only, starting with a kestrel or a red tail. There's so much information about what to do as a beginner with a kestrel or a red tail that you really don't need a sponsor for the first 2 years. When you really need a mentor is the moment that you're no longer required to have one. When you turn general and you get a crazy Cooper's hawk, or you want to fly Merlins, or you're going to get a peregrine, or you're going to do something else, or you want a Harris hawk, which again, you don't really need a lot of support in order to have success with a Harris hawk. But where you need a mentor is after you're required to have the mentor. There are so many backwards things about the current system that invalidate every argument that anybody could make for why things should stay the way they are.
Once again, I get the point of view to a degree, but once again, there are certain skills that I still think would be better to be shown first overall. Once again, I know you don't have any like knowledge in healthcare, for example, but there's
Well, I
certain
do. I just don't want to get
procedures,
into that.
Well, either way, I'm just saying, like, there's certain things that you shouldn't do without being shown first. And yes, you got to practice all that, but
Let me hit that real quick, which is Sterling Bennell died 10 or 12 years ago, so he's not somebody you would have known. He was a great old guy and an amazing brain, probably the smartest IQ-wise person that you could ever meet. Definitely on or above the level of Einstein. Photographic memory that when he was going to medical school, the way that he would learn was that he would look at the page 1 and 2, and then he would turn to page 3 and 4, and then he would turn back to page 1 and 2. And when he went forward again, 1 and 2 were in his brain that he could close his eyes and read off what was on those pages. That's how smart this guy was. And he was a board certified psychiatrist and made his living easily by being a both talk therapy and prescribing psychiatrist, where he would talk to somebody and see what their mental situation was and determine what drugs they should be on, or if they shouldn't be on drugs and get off of whatever it is. But what he was fond of saying was that with his certification, he could schedule an OR and do brain surgery, which he had never done because he had a license to do it. That did not really make him qualified to do it, although in Sterling's case, he might have been able to do it because he was that smart. But the point is that there are appropriate license requirements. There are requirements for licensing and permitting that are based on profit for those who have those permits and licenses, that are not particularly to the benefit of the rest of society. And then there are things that maybe should be licensed. Like, for example, driving, you're entrusting somebody with one of the most dangerous things that we have in society today, the automobile. And so maybe that's something that we should control. But even with that, we have cops who talk about driving being a privilege, and we have courts that affirm that driving is a right, and that you can't keep a license from somebody unless you have a real reason to do so. That there are provisions to make it so that somebody who has trouble with language is not barred from getting a driver's license. But in falconry, we want to keep everybody out. And the problem with you wanting to keep just the wrong people out is if you or I are the ones deciding who the wrong people are. We shouldn't get to decide just because I think that I would be the best person to determine who should be kept out and who should be let in. Doesn't mean that everyone else is going to agree that I'm the right guy. What I know for sure is that everyone else would be worse than me as far as who to have choose.
Well, and I guess one short question, short answer, and then we'll wrap this up. So, this kind of piggybacks off of, this back and forth that we've been kind of having. But overall, do you think the overall, licensure aside, the licensure argument aside for whether or not you should be able to practice falconry or not, do you think that the birds or the animals overall were better off back when there were no rules or regulations, whenever people were just starting to discover it and practice it here in our country? Or do you think they're better off with the system we have in place now?
I think that what we have now violates the rights of our citizens. The fact that there may be, certainly back in the day, in the 60s and 50s, people were shooting every hawk they saw. That was considered that a good sportsman was shooting every predator to try to keep more prey for them to be able to shoot themselves. And I mean, you could very easily, if you were fortunate enough to be flying a Falcon back in those days, if a red tail was coming in on it, you could just shout and wave, and the red tail would just be terrified, and you'd be able to protect your bird that way because everybody was shooting at them. And to some extent, it's still that way with coyotes and eagles. And regardless of what the laws are, people must still be shooting at eagles, because you can point a finger gun at an eagle and yell bang and have it take off because they've been shot at before in today's world. So, and the tiny little advantage of being able to protect my bird by being able to yell at the eagle and it's going to be scared is not something that I want to protect. That is not, when it all comes back down to it. The question you're asking about whether it's better for the animals, no, it's not better for the animals to have the regulations. It's not better for the animals to not have the regulations either. But what we lose with the regulations is our freedom as humans.
You gave me 2 hours of your day today. I mean, I really appreciate it. I hope that you have a good, rest of your week as far as, the holidays and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, thanks again so much for joining me. And who knows, maybe we'll get a chance to have another one of these in person someday.
So I would love to talk about other things. I just let this freewheel, and I've enjoyed talking because I love to talk about falconry, and I love to talk about my opinions. And so, which is part of why I sponsor so many people, is because it allows me to be educating them and listening to myself talk about falconry. It's really a lot of fun, as this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the banner, like I said, back and forth, and I appreciate you giving me the 2 hours of your time. And I have got to go, though. So
yes.
So once again, thank you so much, Karl. We'll hopefully get a chance to do this again sometime in person.
Catch you later.